Today, we have yet another simple one. We're going to be creating this particular abstract tunnel loop, which makes you feel like you're zooming fast at the speed of light. It's a very popular loop on stock websites, so let's see how you can create it yourself. In your default scene, we're going to press X and delete the default cube, then we press Shift A and search for a curved circle. Now, the reason we use this curved circle is because we get all of the curve properties over here, and we can change the resolution on the fly as and when we want to make it higher resolution. And we can also go down to the geometry and go to the bevel section and play around with the depth to give it thickness, and hence we can make it as thick as we want or as thin as we want based on what the look seems like when we actually place our camera. So the first thing that we'll do is increase the size of this a little bit. So we'll just scale it by 5 units by pressing S5, and now we're just going to reduce the bevel depth to maybe 0.2. and if you actually take a closer look at it, you can clearly see the edges like that. So we're going to have to actually change this resolution up to 32 to make it nice and smooth. Now we can go ahead and place our camera by selecting the camera, pressing Alt G to clear location, Alt R to clear rotation, then pressing RX 90 and then pressing GX and moving it to the side till it comes perfectly to the center. Now we can press 0 on our numpad to go into the camera view, and you can go to the camera settings over here and decrease the focal length down to something like 18 just so that we have more of the object visible. This is when you can actually select the Bezier circle and play around with the actual bevel depth, and you can see how it affects your actual render. So for now, I'll keep it at 0.2 itself. Next, I'm going to go back to my camera settings, go to viewport display and increase passport out all the way to 1 so that I don't see anything outside the camera view to distract me. After that, I'm going to select my Bezier circle, go to the materials and add in a new material, or you can select the default material because we're not using it for anything else anyway. We'll change the name of the material to streaks because we're going to be making light streaks and animating that for the entire animation. So to actually see the material, we can switch our viewport shading from solid to rendered by pressing this button over here, and we don't require the light, but just to help see it initially, we'll select the light, press Alt G to clear location and then press GX and just bring it into the cylinder so that we can actually see everything. Next, we'll bring our cursor to the junction of these two windows, click and drag to add in a new window, and we'll change it from the 3D viewport to the shader editor. Then we'll press N to hide this side panel, and if you can't find the nodes, make sure you have Bezier circle object selected and they should appear. If they still don't, press A to select everything and period on your numpad to centralize the nodes. Next up, we're going to play with the alpha by using a noise texture. So we'll press Shift A and search for a noise texture, and with the node wrangler switched on, we'll press Ctrl T to add in a texture coordinate and mapping nodes. Next, we'll switch it from generated to object, and we'll plug this color into a color ramp by pressing Shift A and searching for a color ramp and plugging this value in here and plugging the output of the color ramp into the alpha of the principled BSDF. Now, if you start dragging your black slider in, certain areas of your mesh should start disappearing. But for now, it just looks black because we haven't actually told Eevee to allow transparency. So we have to go down to the material settings and change the blend mode from opaque to alpha blend. And now we can actually see the world background, which is the grayish color. Along with that, we can also change our shadow mode from opaque to none because light would not create any shadows. After this, we can go to the mapping node and just change the scale on the X and Y to something really small, but not 0. So we'll go with 0.01. And then we can increase the Z value to something high. We'll go with something like 30. And these are your light streaks. Now, the actual animation is going to be changing the Z value of the rotation to actually get it to seem like it's moving. So if it seems like there's not enough motion when you actually play around with this Z value, make sure that you increase the X and Y scales. So maybe I can change both of these to 0.1. And that way, when you play around with the Z value, you should be able to see much more motion. So it's up to you and what you prioritize in your particular render. So I'm going to keep them at 0.05, and that's the values that I'm going to be using. Next up, we need these streaks to have their own color and to also be emissive. So what we can do is press Shift A and search for a math node and change it from add to multiply. And we can use this color into the first socket and change the second value to something like 20 so that it becomes fairly emissive, and then plug this into the emission strength. And for the emission color, for now to see the bloom, we can just increase it to white. Now you see there is no bloom because we haven't switched it on, and hence we'll do all of our animation render defaults. So in our render settings, we'll switch on bloom, and then we'll go to our output properties, change the frame rate to 30 frames per second. The end frame can be 150 so that it's a 5-second long animation, and the output can be wherever you want it to be with a file format of your choice. I'm going to use FFmpeg video with an encoding container change to MPEG 4 and an output quality of perceptually lossless. Then we can go ahead and change this color from white to a number of colors. The first thing that we'll do is search for a Voronoi texture because that allows us to get different cells shaded painted in different colors. And then we can press Shift A and search for a color ramp and just plug this color into the factor and then press this plus to add in a new marker. And then the first marker will drag it in, the second marker will also drag it in a little bit. And now we'll change these colors to the colors that you want. So for this particular animation, I'll probably go with some blues, yellows, and greens. So I'll change this one to a nice yellowish color. This middle value I'll change to a nice bright blue color. And this last one I can change to maybe a greenish color. Then I can plug this color into the emission of the principled PSDF, and we should be able to see them now. Since we can now see them, the first thing that we'll do is switch off the light by selecting it and pressing delete to remove it. Now we can select this again, and you can clearly see the cells being shaded, but we don't want it to be like this. We want them to follow the streaks. So we'll go ahead and just use the output from the mapping of the texture coordinates and use that as the input to our Voronoi texture. Now you can see these streaks of green, blue, and yellow, and we can go to the world settings and change this color from gray all the way to black, that we see the streaks nicely. Next up, I want the bloom to be even more, so I'm going to increase the value to maybe 50, and I'm going to go to my render properties, go all the way down to color management and change the look from none to very high contrast, and then I'll just continue to increase the value to maybe 100, and that seems all right. The next thing is I actually need this to be animated. So we'll go ahead and increase the timeline a little bit so that we can see it better, and over the mapping node, we'll just go to frame 0, hover over the rotation values and press I, and then go to frame 150. On the Z, one full circle will be 360 degrees, so hover over it and tap I. Now select the node, come down here and press T linear, and it should be a perfect loop. So this is what the animation currently looks like. If you want to see the actual speed, you can always change it from play every frame to frame dropping, and that'll give you an idea of the actual speed at which these streaks are moving. Now you can always play around with the scales to get different distributions of the colors and just have fun messing around with it to get exactly what you require. So once you're done with that, all you have to do is press render animation. Hopefully you learned something from this video, and you can see how you can get fairly cool animations that sell for quite a lot on stock video websites by yourself, easily in just a few steps. If you liked this tutorial, be sure to check out other videos on my channel, and thank you so much for watching because the watch time really helps. I release videos every single day, so if you're into that, be sure to subscribe, and until the next one comes out, keep creating and stay creative.